Living close to one's children in old age seems, at first glance, like a choice full of promise. After all, who wouldn't want to grow old surrounded by love, support, and security? But what if, in reality, this close proximity is the doorway to something unexpected? The loss of autonomy and even identity. This is where Stoicism offers a new perspective. True well-being doesn't reside in physical closeness but in inner serenity and freedom. Living so close to one's children can, without us realizing it, turn small acts of care into a cycle of emotional dependency and invisible constraints. Imagine spending a lifetime building values, nurturing passions, and then, in old age, feeling pressured to reshape yourself to meet others' expectations, even if they are close family members. What was meant to be a time of peace and self-fulfillment turns into a field of subtle tensions and daily dilemmas. How can we preserve our own essence without breaking bonds of affection? Seneca and Marcus Aurelius, masters of Stoicism, show us that it's possible, but it requires attention and discipline to avoid the trap of emotional accommodation. And so, the big question arises: how can we achieve a balance that allows us to enjoy the love of family without giving up our autonomy? This answer can be the dividing line between a fulfilled old age and a life where every choice seems to slip away. Let's explore this reflection together, and discover how Stoicism could be the key to a truly happy and independent old age. Living near one's children in old age might sound like a promise of tranquility and affection, but in practice, this closeness brings unexpected challenges. It's as if autonomy, hard-won over a lifetime, starts slipping through our fingers. Marcus Aurelius, with his Stoic philosophy, taught us to find peace amid inevitable challenges. But does this family proximity undermine that serenity? When children become neighbors or share the same house, the elderly, despite their life experience, may end up losing their own space. It's not uncommon for small decisions, like choosing a time for coffee or deciding whether to go to the park, to become a point of hidden tension. Yet, the pursuit of harmony remains, even amid this scenario. Stoic philosophy reminds us that control over our own actions and reactions is the greatest power we have. But this wisdom isn't so easy to apply when what's at stake is living with those we love. Imagine Mrs. Maria, a woman who spent years raising her children with care, now finding herself in a position where roles seem to reverse. She wants to enjoy her days in peace but feels there are invisible expectations around her. This situation doesn't just interfere with her freedom. It also brings up emotions Mrs. Maria may not have known she had. Thus, a coexistence that was supposed to be full of love and security can become a web of subtle conflicts that directly impact emotional well-being. As a result, the elderly begin to reflect on their own happiness, on what truly matters, and even question themselves. Is this the best path for me? This doubt, in itself, leads to the next point. By living close to their children, can they really maintain their autonomy? When an elderly person finds themselves surrounded by family, it can seem like a picture of safety and comfort, but behind the curtains, the loss of autonomy knocks at the door. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, once said that living under someone else's control, even out of love, wears down the soul. For someone who has spent a lifetime making decisions, dealing with the small limitations of day-to-day life, like not being able to go out without notice or choosing what to watch at night, creates an internal conflict. It's a silent irony. The presence that should bring lightness ends up imposing a new kind of dependency. This scenario, though common, is rarely discussed in depth. Often, the family members themselves don't realize that by helping too much, they may be interfering in the space of the very people they wish to protect. A practical example? Imagine a father, always used to taking his morning walk alone, now finds himself escorted by his children for supposed safety. For him, this change doesn't just represent company but rather a loss of freedom. And Stoic philosophy suggests that, to live in peace, we must learn to balance our internal reactions. But is there an easy way out in this type of coexistence? This is the dilemma. Autonomy that seems to slip away in the desire to protect. In trying to balance family love with personal independence, the elderly end up questioning what is truly worth preserving. And it's at this turning point that they need to seek something more, something that transcends the simple desire for companionship. What, then, will be the next step in this quest for balance and serenity? The emotional weight that falls on the shoulders of the elderly in family coexistence is an often underestimated aspect. Take Mrs. Maria as an example, a woman with an easy smile who, despite all her life experience, feels the emotional toll of always being available for her grandchildren, even when she just wants some time to herself. Over time, this routine compromises not only her joy but also her physical and mental health. It's an internal battle between the desire to be there for family and the need to safeguard her own well-being. As Seneca said, "Nothing is as heavy as the mind that carries what does not belong to it." This emotional burden, though common, is not easily resolved. The elderly often hesitate to say no for fear of seeming ungrateful or selfish, but this is actually a burden that Stoicism encourages us to avoid. The philosophy suggests that it is essential to cultivate an inner space of tranquility, where the elderly can find peace, even amid family chaos. Mrs. Maria, for example, might set schedules or activities with her grandchildren that don't intrude on her personal routine. In this way, she could enjoy their company without compromising her emotional health, balancing love and boundaries in a way that respects both sides. Understanding this need for balance is essential to maintaining well-being amid family life. After all, as Marcus Aurelius once said, "Our mind is a refuge that no one can touch unless we allow it." The question that remains, then, is, how can each elderly person cultivate this inner serenity without losing themselves amid external demands? And thus begins the search for something greater, a balance that, beyond being desired, is necessary. Stoicism teaches us that balance is not just desirable but essential for a fulfilling life, especially in old age. By maintaining this balance, an elderly person can navigate between family love and independence without sacrificing either. To achieve this, it's necessary to set healthy boundaries that won't be interpreted as coldness or detachment. As Marcus Aurelius taught us, true peace doesn't come from giving in to all external expectations but from knowing where our own priorities are anchored. Thus, an elderly person can live with a heart full of love and, at the same time, a mind at peace. This balance, however, is no simple task. It is an art that requires practice and, above all, self-knowledge. It's necessary to recognize what truly matters, to know when it's time to be with others and when it's time to retreat to preserve one's sanity. Imagine, for example, an elderly person who commits to being with their grandchildren on specific days but dedicates mornings to reading or meditation, an act that reinforces their serenity and mental clarity. It's these small commitments to oneself that form the foundation of a healthy and harmonious coexistence. For the elderly, achieving this harmony means more than avoiding conflicts. It's about preserving their own essence while sharing life with those they love. And Stoic philosophy offers valuable tools for this journey. Then comes a reflection. How to turn the wisdom of a Marcus Aurelius or a Seneca into a daily practice that serves as an anchor for emotions and decisions. This is the step that leads to the rediscovery of something fundamental, one's own identity. Mrs. Maria, in her quest for something beyond family demands, found a way to reconnect with herself through gardening and painting. Stoic philosophy suggests that activities like these strengthen the spirit, providing not just an escape but also a renewal of purpose. Imagine Mrs. Maria's mornings, watering her plants, watching life sprout from her hands. Gardening, like Stoicism, teaches patience and acceptance, values that help her cope with daily challenges. Gradually, she rediscovers who she truly is without letting her identity dissolve into family responsibilities. This reunion with enjoyable activities is not just a pastime but an act of resistance. It prevents life from becoming an automatic sequence of obligations. When Mrs. Maria dedicates herself to painting, she isn't just creating art. She's cultivating her own soul, freeing herself from external expectations. For any elderly person, whatever the passion, music, literature, or crafts, dedicating time to something personal is a daily reminder that their essence is still alive and vibrant. This commitment to oneself, however small it may seem, is a practice of self-valuation. Each day, Mrs. Maria feels the return of joy and freedom. She realizes that she doesn't have to choose between love for her family and self-love. Both can coexist, each in its own space. And so, this path of rediscovery leads her to reflect on what it truly means to have autonomy in old age. After all, who are we without the things we love to do? This question is the thread that leads us to the next stage. Understanding why independence is so vital for mental and physical health. Independence is the pillar that supports mental and physical health in old age. For Mrs. Maria, this autonomy allows her to remain true to her own passions and values, living in alignment with what truly matters to her. Stoic philosophy reinforces the idea that living in harmony with our principles is fundamental for peace of mind. When an elderly person preserves their independence, they're not just avoiding emotional overload, they're nurturing their own soul, staying true to themselves, even if the winds of family coexistence try to sway them. Maintaining this independence doesn't mean giving up on love and togetherness, but rather setting boundaries that protect individual identity. When Mrs. Maria dedicates her mornings to her personal activities, she is creating a safe space where her choices are neither questioned nor adapted to others' expectations. This is the space where she renews her energy, preparing for the rest of the day with a lighter mind and a peaceful heart. Thus, this constant practice of safeguarding her autonomy strengthens her emotional resilience. And it's this balance, between loving presence and independence, that transforms family coexistence into something light and beneficial. Mrs. Maria realizes that by cultivating her autonomy, she becomes an even more pleasant companion for those she loves, as her own happiness and well-being don't depend on others. And this raises one last question. How can each of us apply this Stoic wisdom in our own lives? Perhaps the secret lies in understanding that independence is the true path to happiness in old age, and at any stage of life. We've reached the point where all of this boils down to a choice, whether or not to apply what we've learned here. When you think about your own life, do you see the value in preserving your identity and autonomy, even among those you love? True peace, as Stoicism teaches us, doesn't come from what others do or expect, but from the balance we cultivate within ourselves. So, what will you do with this knowledge? Are you ready to adopt practices that respect both your independence and your family ties? You can start with small actions, dedicating daily time to what you love or learning to set limits that preserve your personal space. Do you feel in control of your choices? The journey to a full and independent life is built step by step, and each action you decide to take is an investment in your happiness. Reflect on what we've seen and imagine what your life will look like when you apply these principles of balance and peace. And if this is a vision you want to achieve, why not start now? To keep delving into wisdom and learning how to apply these teachings in every aspect of life, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. Let's explore Stoic philosophy together and unveil the secrets to a truly complete and satisfying life.